I'm curious, at that point when you went to the hospital thinking you're having a heart attack, I've had the same experience, and I wasn't having a heart attack, and they said it's stress, and I said, I don't feel stressed, I'm fine. And it turns out I was stressed, and ended up learning about anxiety attacks and how those can cause these pains in your body that feel like really intense and can feel like a heart attack. I also did the Lexapro thing for a little bit. In my experience, I'm very type A. I gather that you're also type A. I really tried for a season to power through that. I didn't want that to be true of me, that I needed to acknowledge that I was overcommitted or overstressed, or that I had some work to do in this psychological space to figure out why my body was doing this. Did you try to power through? Did you get curious really quick? How did you respond to that?
The first thing I did was, this is like right at the end of that murder trial, I thought, gosh, what is happening? So the first thing I did, which is what a lot of people do, is I bought a convertible Mercedes. Or maybe not a Mercedes. People buy Ferraris and other stuff. I could only afford a Mercedes. So I was like, well, this will do it. I mean, surely I'll feel better buying this thing. And that lasted for about 4 months, and I sold it. And that was my first kind of awareness, response, was to buy a car. And so I didn't have a high amount of self-awareness at that point, but I did have enough to know that something was wrong. And so I didn't stop there, and I continued to explore what is happening. Why am I feeling this anxiety? Why am I sensing it? Why am I no longer passionate about this job? And so all the while trying to find, am I going to buy a business? Am I going to start a business? Am I praying about this? I prayed about it every day. Very simple prayer. Dear God, please give me something else to do. And I did that for, like I said, almost 5 years. And so what happened is, yes, I did try to power through it. At first I thought, well, maybe it's criminal law. And I started to take on some civil cases and still in the courtroom, but it wasn't happening for me. And it was okay, but I needed to feel almost in my whole body, a sense of inspiration about the work that I was doing, and it wasn't happening. So as I tried to power through it in my law career, I felt like I was just reaching a dead end. And that was, I think, really the low point for me when I felt like that it wasn't going to happen, that I wasn't going to feel this kind of inspiration again. And that's when I sort of just stumbled into this volunteer job at the hospital.
I know oftentimes when leaders, especially if you've been doing something for 20 years and you're great at it, there's this sense of a humbling when we go through things like this. And oftentimes getting through it is dependent on people around us who are instrumental in giving advice or giving encouragement. Oftentimes the people who stay in that valley the rest of their life, they stay isolated. Did you have people who were cheering for you? Did you have people that you were confiding in and saying, I'm struggling with this. What do you think? How do I get to this next place in my life that there's more clarity about what I'm supposed to be doing?
I will say, we talked about my wife. We've been married for 33 years, and she's my biggest cheerleader. But this was a struggle for her because, she helped put me through law school. And I was at the top of my game. I'd never lost a jury trial. I made a lot of money, a whole lot of money. And, I didn't have to worry about credit card debt. Dave, are you listening? And he's probably not, but
he'll listen.
But okay, cool. And so anyway, no, I didn't. I made that kind of money, and we spent within our means, and so it was a challenge for her. But in answer to your question, the person that really was a sort of an anchor point for me was Father Cyprian, who is a monk at Assumption Abbey, a Trappist monastery in the Mark Twain National Forest, about an hour and a half from Springfield, Missouri. And I started going there on retreat about 20 years ago. And he was a person who was kind of willing to provide some spiritual direction at that point. He's 90 now. But in those years, I would go there on retreat. I'm a family brother there. So I live with the monks when I go there. I live behind the cloister. I follow their schedule. It's a long story. I write about it in my book. But even to this day, I talk to him frequently, and he has been a sort of guiding light for me in a very gentle, subtle, non-judgmental way. And so I would say that he has been a stabilizing force in my life, and especially during those years. And I'm not Catholic, but the Catholics would call this period the Paschal Mystery. And so the Paschal Mystery is this representation of the valley that we can find ourselves in, and we can't see the mountaintop. We don't even know that it's there at this point in the depth of the valley. Or really, its representation in the Hebrew Bible is the Exodus. It's this notion of darkness before light, and ultimately, it's about the death and resurrection of Christ, and it's embodied in the Paschal Mystery. And so he helped walk me through the Paschal Mystery of that time in my life.
I think this is really key for leaders listening, because at some point in your time as a leader, business owner, entrepreneur, you're going to hit a wall. And I have found in my own experience, I'm hearing this in your story, and I've seen dozens of cases where leaders hit that wall and they do one of two things. They either run up into the wall and they blow up in this ball of fire, or they find somebody as a guide, as a mentor, or several people, and make sure that they're not isolated, and these people help us navigate through that storm. And we grow through that. And like you said, we go from darkness to light. We have this more enlightened approach to what we're supposed to do with our lives and how we lead. It's a transformational experience if we navigate that storm in the proper way. But it can also be the beginning of the end. And I think, the difference is not being alone and having people around you that you can talk to.
I think you raise a very important point, because especially in this age, we are sort of falsely presuming that with all of the technology and access to information that we have, that somehow that will insulate us from, as you said, the impact of the wall, that the ultimate effect won't be as great, because surely with all of the information at our fingertips, we can find the answer, and the answer will, sort of buffer that impact. But in fact, it's not true, because you can't have a relationship with a book. And but you can have a relationship with a person. You can experience what it feels like to receive kindness, to receive compassion. You can't receive that from a book.
Yes.
I mean, you can be inspired by a book.
So true.
But you can't receive that from Google. Google will give you all kinds of answers. I mean, yesterday we're looking at technology for, Oculus glasses, and can we find ways to be in meeting rooms together remotely? I mean, but technology ultimately is not going to be a place where we find the embodiment of compassion and humility and kinship and mutuality. So that comes from people. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's very important.